Spider-Man literally wipes out the Sinister Six in the most brutal fashion possible. Stick around for that as we go through Marvel superheroes who go way overboard, starting off with Bishop's betrayal of the X-Men during 2007's Messiah Complex. This story revealed how far the time-displaced mutant is willing to go to change the future for the better. Bishop comes from a dark future where mutants and humanity had eventually gone to war, and he eventually ended up trapped in the present. He became an X-Man and he served on a number of teams off and on over the years, even being Professor X's personal bodyguard for a while, and he was just incredibly popular. Now, after the decimation event depowered almost all the mutants on Earth, the birth of Hope Summers signaled hope for the mutants, as she was the first mutant born since the decimation, and she was an incredibly powerful one too. But Bishop's past came back to haunt him, convincing him that Hope was the cause of the dark future that he came from. He betrayed the X-Men and planned to take out Hope before she could grow up and change the world forever. He set off nano sentinels within the One Sentinel squad, taking down the human pilots and pitting the Sentinels against the X-Men. He then ambushed Forge in the chaos, laying a trap to capture Cable, who was protecting Hope, and end Hope's life. By the end of the event, Bishop had to flee the X-Men after firing on Hope and instead accidentally striking and nearly killing Charles Xavier. Now, in the comic book universe, Hank Pym and his partner Janet Van Dyne were not only heroes in a relationship like in the MCU, but they were founding members of the Avengers. Their life together was also not as seemingly well structured as it was in the MCU, especially when Hank experienced a mental breakdown after being suspended from the team. He accidentally dropped and smashed some vials containing various unknown gases, and the released gases gave Pym a radical temporary personality change that was basically a severe case of schizophrenia. He took the new identity of Yellow Jacket, kidnapped Van Dyne, and proposed marriage to her, as Pym had long wanted to do that. Now, realizing that Yellow Jacket was really Pym, Van Dyne decided to just play along, fearing that she would worsen his psychological condition if she did otherwise. Their relationship was bad, with Pym feeling like a useless scientist the whole time and being jealous of his wife's success as a fashion designer. It all took a disturbing turn, however, when Hank physically struck Janet, highlighting the troubling depths to which he had sunk. But then, in order to try and save face, Hank organized an attack on the Avengers by a rogue robot that he intended to defeat himself. But Hank didn't defeat it. Janet did, and Hank got booted from the team for his absolutely insane actions. But speaking of the Avengers, during the Avengers vs. X-Men event, Cyclops became a host for the Phoenix Force alongside 4 other mutants. Now, possessed by the Phoenix, Cyclops actually de-lifed Professor Xavier, which was a huge betrayal, as for a long time, Cyclops was Professor X's golden boy, and Professor X was like his pops. As arrogant and manipulative as Charles Xavier was, no one doubted his dedication to the cause or his love for his students, especially Scott, but his motivation for doing it was a bit more of just being a villain than anything else. And it was only Xavier whose life was lost, and he's died like 8 times, so it's not the biggest loss in the world. Afterwards, Cyclops adopted a much more revolutionary attitude though, leading a rebellious team of X-Men and creating some way more compelling X-Men stories to boot, so it kinda came up roses. Kind of. But back to Professor X, he has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds. It's not good and it never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those that he considers friends and colleagues. One of the worst examples of this came in Giant-Sized X-Men #1. Charles Xavier had to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group was being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we later learned that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seemed to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making got a bunch of mutants killed in action and just taking responsibility, Charles just erased the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops, who then became Xavier's little boy scout. This came back with a vengeance and bit Xavier in the wheels when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came back for some vengeance. Now, moving away from the X-Men, the Sentry is a character that I feel many people are about to become very familiar with, thanks to him now being cast in the MCU, which is super exciting. This guy has the power to destroy pretty much anybody in the Marvel Universe, with his powers being often called the equivalent to 1,000,000 exploding suns, which is a lot of power. He has reassembled his own molecules and taken out the Molecule Man for an example of how powerful he is. He's almost too powerful to include in a lot of stories, but it's the fight, I guess you could call it, between the Sentry and Ares, the literal god of war in issue 2 of Marvel's Siege event, that left people fully aware of how far this guy can go, and with such ease that it's actually terrifying. Ares, the Greek god of war in this story, started out on the Dark Avengers before redeeming himself and joining the good guys. This literal god had been showing how awesome he was, taking on the bad guys, and then he turns his sights on Norman Osborn. Unfortunately, Norman has the Sentry as his bodyguard here. Sentry punches Ares halfway across Asgard, and maybe 2 or 3 punches later, he just grabs both ends of the God of War and just rips him completely in half. Question: how do you guys feel about Disney's MCU TV shows? I know some of them are really good and some are a little bit harder to like, but people seem to be mixed when it came to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This show actually had some really awesome, surprisingly graphic moments, and one of them stands out among the rest. This takes place after Steve Rogers has stopped being Captain America, so instead, John Walker has taken up the Captain America mantle on orders from the government. Now, as comic book fans know, John Walker is not the greatest guy around, and in the MCU, it's pretty much no different. In one of the most shocking and dark scenes from the show, from the entire MCU to be honest, in episode 4, after the Flag Smashers just caused the passing of Walker's best friend Lamar, John chases down one of the Flag Smashers, and in front of an entire crowd of people, he very brutally uses the shield of Captain America to bring the Flag Smasher to an end. The bloody shield of Captain America is such a surprising thing to see, especially out of the MCU, where it's all been Disney-fied, and it honestly left everyone who saw the scene for the first time slack-jawed and just lost for words. But what inspired that amazing scene? I'll tell you. It's the Ultimate Universe. In Ultimates number 12, Captain America is caught in a fight with Herr Kleiser, who is an old German rival of his. Now, just for better context here, Herr Kleiser is actually one of the Chitauri, and they launched a full-scale invasion of Earth in the modern day, which gave Captain America the opportunity to put Kleiser down for good. So, Herr Kleiser is naked for some reason following a fiery explosion, and the two are going punch for punch, with Kleiser even getting the upper hand on Captain America and ranting about eating Steve's face. It's weird. Now, after Nick Fury tries to intervene and Kleiser tries to make Cap surrender, America finally gets the upper hand. Captain America pins Kleiser down, lifts his shield above his head just like in the MCU, and he slams it down edge first right into Kleiser's chest, basically slicing the guy in half. Then, Captain America insults the country of France. Just what happened. But to jump back for a little bit, John Walker's little shield smashing scene actually kind of reminds me of something that the Punisher would do. Punisher, being a regular guy, has to come up with some pretty inventive ways of dispatching criminals and super criminals. Usually it involves heavy weaponry, but he tossed a guy to a great white shark, he tossed one to wolves in a zoo, he's disintegrated the Hulk with magic, and even smothered a guy with a much larger guy. A pretty intense fight that I love to talk about is when Punisher defeated Wolverine by parking a steamroller on top of him, but if we're talking superheroes going just way over the top and way too far, the Punisher moment that takes the cake would have to be when he faced the entire Marvel Universe. In this alternate world, it's a superhero battle, not a crime, that brings an end to Frank's family. Because of that, Frank Castle took down everyone. Literally every hero and villain. I think it's the final fight with Daredevil, however, that really hits though. It's a slogfest, and Frank doesn't realize what he's done till Matt Murdock, who happened to be Frank's childhood friend, pulls off his mask before he passes away, which then prompts Frank to turn on himself, and it left everyone reading it just super depressed. We're gonna move on from that. Enough about Punisher. What about zombies. In Marvel Zombies number 2, zombie Peter Parker and Luke Cage leave the group of cosmically superpowered zombies and they regain their good guy nature, going on to try and protect what's left of humanity on Earth. Unfortunately, they get teleported to a different reality by Malcolm Cortez's son. In Marvel Zombies Returns, the zombie heroes, Spider-Man and Luke Cage, end up on Earth 91126. Zombie Spider-Man thinks that he can cure their zombie virus by finding the Lifeline tablet. But just as he's getting underway with his plan, he gets distracted and forced into a fight with this reality's Dr. Octopus, Electro, Mysterio, Vulture, Kraven, and Sandman, the Sinister Six. Despite trying his best to hold back his hunger, Spider-Man can't really resist Kraven's scent, and he kinda ends up attacking him, biting into his neck. Mysterio tries using illusions to try and fend him off, but Spider-Man's senses help him locate and dispose of Mysterio very quickly. Electro and Dr. Octopus try to attack Spider-Man together, but this just puts them in positions to hurt each other instead, with Electro using up most of his power and Dr. Octopus left electrically deep fried for Spider-Man to eat later on. As they realize this is not going to go well, the remaining two just try to hightail it out of there, but before Vulture can escape, Spider-Man literally rips off his wings and uses them to finish off Electro before he can shoot more electricity. Only Sandman manages to survive from the chaos, going to attack this universe's Spider-Man for this utterly sickening display of brutality. It's insane. But that's a zombie Spider-Man from another universe. The real Spider-Man has gone overboard on his own on a few occasions. When Spider-Man was in possession of the symbiote suit, he was not his normal self. He was much more ruthless, and Spider-Man can already knock criminals into a coma when he's pulling his punches. The death of Jean DeWolf is one story that took place during this time, and it's one of the best Spider-Man comics of all time. One of the superhero's closest allies in the NYPD gets taken out by a villain named Stanley Carter, aka Sin Eater. Both Spider-Man and Daredevil team up to hunt Sin Eater down, but when Spider-Man interrupts Sin Eater from attacking Betty Brant and almost wiping her out, Spider-Man starts to lay into the guy, beating the snot out of Stanley while giving him an earful. Peter goes so far that Daredevil notices his heartbeat pounding way too hard and he attempts to pull Peter off of the already beaten villain. He has to try and defend the criminal from Peter Parker, who is seemingly pretty much gonna take him to the grave. Daredevil says, if you want him, you'll have to come through me, and that was probably not the best choice of words because the very next panel shows Daredevil flying out through a window. If it wasn't such a serious moment, I would laugh, and honestly, I did laugh anyways. Is that wrong? I don't know. I can't really help it. Sorry. But that is all we got. Thank you guys so much for watching today on Top 10 Nerd. I'm Adam Andrews. I'll catch you all on the flippy flop. Stay safe, and peace out, you nerds. Whoop, whoop.